This is a Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon exclusive.
Thank you very much indeed.
On this episode of Rock Talk, Mitch Lafon goes one-on-one with...
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm David Coverdale of the band Whitesnake.
David Coverdale from Whitesnake talks about being in isolation.
And, we seem to be making a lot more friends.
Having Joel Hoekstra in the band.
But he put the Joel Hoekstra Les Paul on there.
And the Rock album.
And the thing I wanted to achieve on the Rock album, it really was...
Whitesnake, the Rock album, on CD, digital, and 180-gram limited edition double LP white vinyl. Available on June 19th. Pre-order it today at whitesnake.com. And now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this very special episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Special because I have the one, the only, the legendary David Coverdale as a guest. But not just that. I've got Alan Niven. So it's like a what do you call it? A summit of the great? Is that how we call it? Alan, bonjour.
Oh, good Lord.
Well, what?
Certainly not.
It is like a Russian American summit where you have the two great superpowers sitting down together and discussing music. That's sort of how I see it. But
that's overly generous. But what I would say is that David to me is a superpower of rock and roll. I'd agree with that. Back in the day, I was very fortunate to tour with him in 1984 in the United Kingdom. And then later, we spent 6 months on the American highways and freeways in 87, 88 with David. And I have nothing but fond, good memories of him. He's a gentleman, first and foremost. He's earthy. He's from Newcastle. Although you can't always tell from his accent. But we had great times out with Whitesnake. But perhaps one of my most favorite and amusing memories of David is that, all the things you do, you have a band that goes number one, you make a little bit of a fuss here and there and so on and so forth. But I got a phone call from David one day, which took me completely by surprise. And he goes, "Here, I just saw you on CNN." And I said, "Really?" And what had happened was I was walking through Roppongi and was assailed by some people with a fuzzy microphone that is stuck over my head. And then they asked me questions about how difficult was it for the Gaiji to get a cab to stop for them in Tokyo. And this apparently was CNN, which I didn't realize at the time. And apparently it got shown on CNN. And David was far more impressed about the fact that I was on CNN than I had bands at number one. So I thought that was kind of amusing.
Very amusing.
But no, David is definitely one of the voices of rock and roll. And I believe he's got, 3 records coming up?
Yeah, he does. In fact, he's got the Rock album, which comes out on June 19th. It's part of this trilogy series called the Red, White, and Blues trilogy. So the Love Songs album comes out later this year. All the ballads of Whitesnake. Then the Rock album, June 19th. And then finishing off, I believe he says in February with the Blues album. So just a lot of new Whitesnake coming up. And it's not just, compilation albums where they sort of grab a few songs and stick them out. They've been revisited, they've been remixed, they've been remastered, they've been reimagined in the sense, all the R's. It's your 3 R's of rock and roll, and it's great. I've heard the rock.
I'm going to be very interested specifically to hear the Blues album, and I'm also smiling because doing something similar to this was something I wanted to do with the Great White catalog years ago, but I couldn't get capital to buy it or think about it. So well done, David, for doing it. My only reserve is, please God, tell me you haven't touched Love Ain't No Stranger, because I think of all the Whitesnake songs, that is my favorite. And it's perfect the way it is, and don't touch it. It's just magic the way it is. There was one night years ago when I was not a nipper, but not that old, but me and my then roommate, Don Dokken, maybe had a couple of libations, and believe it or not, he and I sat and played that song over and over and sang it together for about an hour. We were both so in love with that song. But I sincerely hope that perfection is kept as that perfection.
Well, you can always improve on perfection, but either way, I've heard the Rock album. I've had a chance to have a promo copy sent, and it is just magical. He did an album in 1997 called Restless Heart, and you come off the 80s production stuff of the self-titled album, and then a slip of the one with Steve Vai, and they were big and they were bombastic and they had all the bells and whistle, and then this Restless Heart one didn't have all that production to it. Still great albums. I love the album. I think it's a fantastic album. But he took 4 songs from that album and gave them some steroids for this rock, and they just sound even better than I have on my iTunes, or better than I remember. And it's just like, oh my God, to hear Crying and Restless Heart now is just like, yes, thank you, David. You did a good job. But just real quick, who were you touring with in '84? Guns was later. Great White.
Oh, this is Great White on a bill with Whitesnake in the United Kingdom in the winter, and it was miserable weather and cold, and not an awful lot of fun touring in Europe at that time of year. But it crosses your mind. Can you imagine the sort of bluesy record that David might do with, say, Ann Wilson of Heart? Can you imagine those two working together on duets?
Oh, that'd be great. I mean, sort of like Alison Krauss and Robert Plant, what they're doing, just a different kind of side of their professional catalog, or whatever. But I'm curious.
Exactly. I don't know if you ever saw it, but Martin Scorsese did a series of movies about the blues, and in one section there's a moment when Lulu, who some people might know, little Scottish lass with just an awesome voice who had a sort of pop career. And, oh God, to remember his name was Jones, and he was famous for having women throw their underwear at him. Help me out here. He did
Paul
songs
Stanley.
like Delilah. No, not Paul Stanley. Stop already. But the pair of them were filmed singing a blues standard together, and it was stunning. And you sat there and you went, wow, they went mainstream entertainer with their voices. But my God, what they might have done if they were allowed to be a little bit more artistic and just go into a blues vein.
I'm actually curious to see
Tom Jones.
Tom Jones. That's a...
Tom Jones and Lulu. Two people that you wouldn't necessarily think of in a blues idiom. But when they sang a blues song together, it was just stunning.
I'm actually curious to see what this blues album is going to be, because my understanding is that David doesn't have access to the early Whitesnake catalog, all this contractual stuff, and he has access to the later stuff from Slide It In upwards. And if you're thinking blues from Whitesnake, you're probably thinking those early ones. So either he's... Anyway, I have no idea what the track listing is. I have no idea where he's going for it, but if it's re-recordings of the early stuff, I'm in for it. If it's reimagining, whatever it is, as long as David's singing, as long as it's called Whitesnake, I'm in. So I'm actually very, very curious to see. Like the love songs, it's easy to sort of predict. It's going to be Deeper the Love. Is this love? And the rock album was, Still of the Night. But the blues album intrigues the living daylights out of me. I don't know what the track listing. I don't know what the track listing is going to be. So
me too. I'm curious about that, and isn't it nice to actually have a curiosity about an upcoming release?
Yes.
It's so rare these days that we know that a release is coming, and we go, "Oh, I must make a note of that."
Yeah. And I like what David's done. He's done these box sets over the last few years where he's thrown the kitchen sink in. You get demo versions, you get initial scratch tracks, these things are all 4, 5, 6 discs, And when you think, compilation albums, you think, oh, that thing I'm going to pick up at Walmart for $5. But no, not this. The way it's been approached is you have to own it. You might know Still of the Night, you might know Love Ain't No Stranger, but you've got to get this because there's a fresh coat of paint on it. And it's not deconstructed, it's not re-recorded, it's just embellished, as it says in the press release. And I like that. I like a new sonic perspective because it's 2020. Let's get it up to 2020 standards. Come on, let's do it. Anyway, there you go.
Well, let's get over to David and see what he has to say about it.
You mean you'd rather not listen to me for another couple of minutes? Because I got more stuff to say, I'm sure.
I can get you every day. We can only get David once a year.
All right, so let's get over to the one, the only, the indefatigable, the legendary, and every other kind word you could say, le seul et unique, the one and only, David Coverdale. We are speaking with the legendary singer David Coverdale from the band Whitesnake. The new album, the rock album, drops June 19th, 2020. And as we say in Montreal, bonjour, Monsieur David. Comment allez-vous? How are you?
I'm doing really well, apart from these bloody washout zephyrs driving everybody crazy down here. Just a wacky wind that I'm usually out on the road by now. As you see my social media, people are quick to remind me I should be saying good evening Hamburg tonight. It's heartbreaking, but there you go. It is what it is. But doing well, surprisingly well. I vary between Mr. Saturday Night and, really private, intensely private man when I'm not working in a public eye. So, with social media, it's changed all that, of course, but there you go.
Well, in fact, all right, I'll ask you just a quick question about that. How important is the social media to what you do? Because as a band that's been established for 40 years or more, you have a fan base. Is it important to reach out and say hello?
Well, Michael McIntyre was the one, my co-producer and dear friend for over 30 years. We were at they used to have this big, like the NAMM show, but in Cologne in Germany called Popcom, I think it was. And like all the record companies, new artists would come over, do showcases and stuff like that. And we were there doing so this is how long ago? It must be 20 years. What are we, 2020? Yeah. We were doing a promo trip for my Into the Light solo album. And we, of course, were invited there doing the schmooze all over the place. And he said, David, we've got to get you online. It's the new thing. And I'm going, fuck you. I've got enough to do, blah, blah, blah. But we pulled up his laptop and we went and scoured a couple of band sites. And it was just awful, people being rude to each other. I said, well, I'm going to fucking entertain this. I said, it's going to be outside the house for me. I'm not talking rules and regulations, but just respectful to people. Don't use comparisons. I've never been a fan of that. It just leads to unsavory divisiveness.
That is
and
true.
God knows we need more unifying and divisiveness right now. Of all things, to play politics at this time is the most insane thing I think I've ever witnessed in my life, apart from me getting the job with Deep Purple. But and then it was Doug Aldridge. We were mixing something, and he says, DC, you'd kill at Twitter. And I'm going, what the hell? When I was a child, my dad would say, would you stop Twittering? As if I wouldn't shut up. So that's the only reference I had to Twitter. So it's fabulous. It's a lot less time-consuming than when I was doing sort of in-depth answers on the original Whitesnake.com or DavidCoverdale.com because I had to buy Whitesnake.com. But what's fantastic for me, Mitch, is the interaction with people. Particularly now, we've built up an amazing millions of people check in every day with our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And particularly now, when this is extraordinarily challenging for people in quarantine, in lockdown, I'm doing little songs for people each day, just a bit of fun. And just feeling people, just saying, I love you, I miss you, you're never alone, you're truly loved. Just trying to bring some positive aspect to this really awful time in our existence. And, we seem to be making a lot more friends. It's very much almost a counseling at times, I feel. Just making people, the worst thing, I think one of the worst aspects of the human condition is loneliness. And you can be in a room full of people, a stadium full of people, and feel lonely. So if you have somebody who's reaching out and saying, by the way, did anybody tell you look really good today? Helps people. It's a fun exercise for me, and it takes no effort on my part at all.
No, I agree, and I love doing the whole Twitter thing. And I have to admit, yours, along with like Greg Renoff and Matt Wake, the writer, and are some of the ones I check every day, just because the content is very compelling, and the jokes every day. But let me get
I need a laugh. The dark times in my life since childhood, I've actively sought out humor. It's once again part of who I am, and part, as my wife said recently, she's very active on Instagram. And people are on there telling her, please tell David how nice it is to see this raw aspect. We know he's doing this for us, and and it was very, very sweet to hear. But I need to fucking laugh too, Mitch. So I post a lot of funny stuff that hopefully will, and some naughty stuff, of course. I'm really being me, who I am. And that's what my wife was telling me. A lot of people are going, oh my God, we're starting to get to know David, rather than just David, the
singer or whatever,
legend in his own lunchtime. Yeah.
And I'll just say,
all positive.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say what I find refreshing, though, is the little bits of comedy or the little funny things is nice to see, because a lot of band Twitters are buy our T-shirt, buy our album, buy our concert ticket, then start over, buy our T-shirt, and you don't pound that message into you mix it up with this other side, and it's just very refreshing to say, hey, look at that. Look at that little joke. Look at that little cartoon.
Well, it's important. There's a couple of elements that we utilize in the social media. One is definitely not overplaying our hand. That's something that I set off very early with my dear friend, sadly departed, poor Albert. We both had a very similar feeling of how we wanted to be involved in a particular aspect of social media. You want to be coarse, you want to be rude, you want to be insulting, go and do it somewhere else. There's no room for that here. It's not acceptable in my home, and it certainly isn't acceptable, in social media. So go and play your naughty, silly little game somewhere else. It's just not interesting. But for people to start to get to know me, and me to get to know them, I sang I couldn't even remember the chords. Somebody I knew for 55 years, it's her birthday today, Christine. We used to live close to each other before the Deep Purple days and stuff. And it was a birthday today, some friends of her, and she wanted sailing ships. And I'm going, oh, what the fuck? This is the funniest thing, Mitch. When I write a song, once I've given it over to my guitar gods, I kind of erase the chord shit from my data banks to open up for more ideas, more refreshing. Right, I've passed it on to the guitar gods. Now I can focus on something else. So it's really weird for me to do this, trying to remember the chords for songs I wrote, and then I don't normally do requests, but for instance, Is This Love? I've never played on the guitar. I wrote it on the piano. Deeper the Love I wrote on the piano. It's just so weird to me trying to work out the chords, because I don't have, I'm 7 minutes from my studio, and we've now just actually had it disinfected for me to be able to go and do some work there with Michael. It's strange old times, baby. We got to roll with it.
Oh, it is definitely strange old times. So let's talk a little bit about the old times here. The rock album, of course, like I said, is coming out in June. It has been refreshed, revisited, remixed, remastered, all of the above, and I've had a chance to hear
all the R's.
All the R's. Yeah, the three R's, the three important. And it sounds great, but let me go to some of the songs that American audiences and maybe even Canadian audiences aren't so familiar with. You've got 4 tracks from Restless Heart, this album that was under the name of David Coverdale and Whitesnake, which I've always found amusing because David Coverdale is Whitesnake.
Well, it was after Coverdale Page, my manager, God rest his soul, Howard Kaufman, And Rupert Perry, who at that time was the chairman of EMI, felt it was time for me to work as David Coverdale. And I'd called Adrian and said, look, I'm going to do a solo album. Do you want to get involved? Are you doing anything? He wasn't doing anything at the time. This was, years and years, in 96 or whatever. And so he came over. We connected extraordinarily well. We had a deep, profound friendship. And we pursued this record. Everything was going really well. Some good rock stuff. It's impossible for me not to write rock stuff. And then suddenly we get a visit from the brand new executives. There was a kind of merry-go-round of executive firings and hirings in this period. So one project to another were different execs we were dealing with. It was the weirdest thing. Anyway, these guys came over. I brought in the Polini Montrachet, blew their minds. One of the guys was French. They listened to the record and said, it's absolutely amazing, but we want it to be a Whitesnake record, as per your contract. My contract said David Coverdale, also known as the artist Whitesnake. So contractually, they were right. And I said, well, to me, it's not really a Whitesnake album. There's elements of stuff. So, well, no, we want that. So it was a kind of turn the guitars up. And we'd never gone for the giant guitar rock stuff, if you remember, Mitch, and turn the drums up to try to give it more of a rocking thing. And then the mastering sucked. And, the people I was working with got sick. And Mikey was in a personal dilemma. So this was it was just a troubled chapter. And I became a new father with my son Jasper, of course. But I refused to give it to Geffen, to be honest, because the whole dynamic with them had changed after all the success we had. They had mostly people coming in from business school, and there was no music to be discussed. There were numbers and percentages. And I remember one of them patting me on the leg and almost me really smacking her. Do you remember the scene in True Romance when Brad Pitt goes, don't fucking patronize me, man?
Yep.
Jimmy Page and I, sitting on the roof of the fucking Bellage Hotel in West Hollywood, and this young idiot is tapping me on the leg going, oh, things have changed since you were on MTV. I'm going, what? I was on MTV 5 minutes ago. It had taken me days to talk Jimmy into making those videos we did, because we're both like classic artists. Making funny videos was just not part of the reason we got involved in the music business. But anyway, so that was the beginning of the end for me with the
Restless Heart.
Geffen. And then I bought it. Then I bought it back from EMI with the plans to do literally what I've been doing. So this is decades ago. I've been sitting on. We've revitalized "Good to Be Bad Forevermore." Slide it in. All of the albums. Into the Light. Into the Light's going to be a Whitesnake album now. The guys are thrilled that they're going to be credited as being in Whitesnake, like those guys, Dead Cat Bounce, in Coverdale. So in Whitesnake, because Chris Collier and I have mixed it really, really rocky. And the thing I wanted to achieve on the rock album, Mitch, really was to get a sonic identity and consistency throughout all the different chapters and different producers and engineers and different technologies at different times. But the circumstances, it needed a fresh coat of paint. That's basically how I was looking at it. And once I found Chris Collier and he mixed the Flesh and Blood album with me, I knew I'd found the missing link. So he's a gunfighter, sushi chef, so quick, but very extraordinarily caring. And I like to work very, very quickly. And because I'm really focused on what I'm doing when it's that time. So all of these things we've held up streaming and off iTunes and stuff to make it brand spanking new. And of this time, who isn't listening to digital technology now? iPhones, they sound fucking amazing. One of the things we focus on is making sure we get the warmth of analog and it's not too brittle or crispy digital, And
I'm telling you, listening to this with the AirPods Pro, it's like a 3D experience. But I do just want to ask a couple more about Restless Heart, because
yes.
I I sort of A-B'd what I have in my iTunes and what I'm hearing on this new thing. And I listen to Still of the Night and Best Years, and you can tell that there's a fresh coat of paint, but they're still very true to the original. The Restless Heart.
God, no, we maintain the integrity of that.
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
We definitely.
But the Restless Heart and Crying and Can't Stop Now and Anything You Want, they sound more powerful. They sound more present. They sound just mean and nasty, but in a good way, And I love it.
Yeah. It's a super. I think it's. Reb and I were busy doing something, and Joel had a couple of days off. I think he was working with Cher in Vegas, and I said, "Listen, I've been meaning to ask you." He's extraordinarily precision. He's a beautifully accomplished musician, well-rounded player, as you can testify, and a great guy. I said, "Well, come up to the studio and mess around." And Mikey said, well, "Why don't we have him do some guitar on Restless Heart?" Because as I said earlier, we didn't shoot for the giant guitars. I'd come off Slip of the Tongue, huge production. Coverdale Page, huge production. I wanted it to get back to be a bit more organic, natural, not overdressed. And achieved that. And then it just felt light to me. So Joel came in, and we were really respectful to Adrian's playing. Joel didn't do any solos. They're all Adrian solos as before, but he put the Joel Hoekstra Les Paul on there. So that's thickened that up. And then I think you know him too, extraordinarily keyboard player called Derek Sherinian.
Derek's
He came and just score. Oh my God, awesome. In large case, super stuff. And John Lord, God rest his soul, is one of Derek's heroes. And for me, when I hear these things, it's almost as if the ghost of John's there, not to diminish Derek's fabulous achievement. I've also got him all over Slip of the Tongue for the next anniversary mix. But this is stuff that I've got the support of Warner and Rhino to do. These were the dreams that I discussed with them when we made a huge catalog deal. And over the next 5 to 7 years, we've got the Red, White, and Blues trilogy, as you're aware. So the rock album's coming out June 19th. We have Love Songs, Whitesnake Love Songs, which is kick out, beautiful record. Rhino are digging it, thankfully. That's in October, I think, just in time for your Christmas stocking stuffers. And then we've got Whitesnake the Blues album, possibly February, I think, next year. And then I think we're going to start with the rest. They want to go chronological, I think. So if that's the case, we'll be starting with the Restless Heart box set. And this morning I was listening, I don't know whether you're familiar with the rock sets, Mitch, but we put all kinds of stuff in there. We load it to the max. And we usually put a CD called Evolutions in there, which shows the early starts of songs, either whether it's me just playing acoustic or pathetic piano, and then the evolution of that into what a song you probably know now, And I was listening to the Restless Heart Evolutions. My God, Anything You Want was originally called Red Light, Green Light. We did some changes with that thing midstream, I think. It was very cool. Very cool. But I love the record. I really do.
I do too. And listen, you don't need to ask me if I have it. I'm a completist, and I'm actually staring at the Slip of the Tongue 30th anniversary remaster. You can actually hear it. It's right at it's at my portée, as we say in French. It's my hand's length away. I'm a completist of everything. But so let me ask you this. There are 3 songs on here: Still of the Night, Judgment Day, and Crying, which to me are sort of exactly what Whitesnake is. It's these big, epic songs that these 6-minute, 7-minute things. Talk to me a little bit about these ones and particularly Crying, because Crying has been a song that has been around since 97, and I have always thought had it come out in 87, 88, it would have been an MTV massive,
Well, I got to tell you, when I was working, when I started to write songs with the incredibly gifted Doug Aldrich, we'd finish off this ballad or that song, or and both of us would look at each other and go, "If this was the late '80s." So it became like a joke, to be honest. But the circumstances, the songs are so strong. That's almost. I sang that at 7:30 in the morning at a studio in Reno with Mikey's half asleep, Bjorn Thorsrud, who was engineering, half asleep, and I'm roaring down the microphone at this stuff, and they're going, "Oh my God, I've never heard anybody do this at this time of the day." But I used to get up painfully early in those days. But yeah, it's one of my favorite vocal albums. I think it's very strong. Denny Kamasi's fantastic.
From Montrose.
The Restless Heart. Oh yeah, I adore him. What a great guy. What a great, one of the few drummers I know, like Mickey Fleetwood, who just loves the blues and just plays the blues beautifully. Pagey loved working with Denny. Loved him dearly. We used to call him Rock and Rolex, Swiss timing, so perfectly locked in. And after working with Bonzo, that's extraordinarily important to Jimmy, as you can imagine. But with the bass player we used was a guy who did a couple of live shows with Jimmy Page and I in Japan, called Guy Pratt out of Pink Floyd. And his bass playing is just fabulous, melodic, punchy. He's superb. He's featured in the video we just literally released today. Super player, funny guy. But he was running rampant through the city of the midnight city of Reno, biggest little city in the world, and came to me and said, DC, can I just do my overdubs and get me out of here? Otherwise I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
And I got him back to London in one piece, fortunately. But yeah, it was an interesting piece of work. When you hear the whole thing, this was hard. For instance, Crying. I was tempted, the blues album. It was a flip of a coin whether to put that on the blues album or not, because the blues album's got a lot of epics. Slow and Easy, Crying in the Rain. Judgment Day, obviously whatever I do is personal expression, which to me is the blues. But the packaging of that song is not necessarily a blues epic. It's just one of the Whitesnake epics, But instead, I chose Looking for Love that Sykes and I wrote.
Oh, wow.
For the '87 album. When you hear that, this is the cool thing. We found an ending when Chris and I were remixing. We made an ending to Still of the Night. We found an ending existed for Is This Love, which will be on the Love Songs record. And we found that there was an ending for, crazy one, for Looking for Love. It's all of these things that Keith Olsen, God rest his soul, that we didn't do. He was very FM oriented. And I think him and a guy called John Kolodner, my A&R guy at Geffen, had a little behind DC's back, do this, do that, whatever. When trust is abused sometimes, it happens. And when people think they're doing that for your best interest and it doesn't turn out that way, that's when the house of cards collapses. But, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I'll ask you, I know we're going to run out of time, so I'll just ask you just a couple of questions on that. You've mentioned this blues album, so you've brought in, Joel and others to work on this. Would you consider bringing Bernie Marsden back to beef up the blues one? Because, his fingers play the blues like nobody else.
Well, it's all, yeah, but it all exists. I can't,
okay.
This is one of the sad things, really. You're looking at, this is a couple of years ago. We did that thing with Joel. Rev was interested in doing stuff, but we were busy in my studio doing other things. I can't remember what it was, but we were busy. And Joel was just in and out in a couple of days. He's that proficient. It was amazing. Derek Sweeney and I needed desperately, and I love McKaylee, but this was all of the stuff Derek did for me was before McKaylee became a snake. But it isn't open season, to be honest. What I don't really have time to, we're doing all these box sets that we've been doing to great success. Everybody's after me touching the early stuff, and I have nothing to do with that. contracts that I had back in those days, left over from Deep Purple, because it was the management from Deep Purple. It was all about ownership and copyrights, and I only have like a large percentage of the publishing, but I can't touch those records. They're nothing to do with me. I took over Whitesnake and began with Slide It In, the real actual successful stuff, fortunately. But, you know, I would love one day to have had the time to have remixed some of the early songs. And because we were doing, a lot of people think that the early Snakes lasted for 6 or 7 years. It wasn't. It was 3 years. We did 2 albums a year. That was my contract.
Yeah, well,
I had to write 2 albums a year. Jesus.
I need a remix of Dancing Girls, but let me just quickly get back to that is the greatest song that at some point I will see performed live somewhere. But just on Still of the Night and Judgment Day, and of course later on Crying, you know, MTV and radio back then were very specific. Give me 3 minutes, get to the chorus, don't bore us, and get in. Was there any resistance from the record company or from MTV or radio programmers that just said, hey, dude, this is way too long. You're going to have to give us a 3-minute edit or you can forget it?
Yeah, well, when we started, in those days, you had AOR mixes, which is more the album-oriented rock, or CHR, where you could not have loud solos. So, like these CHR, I hated it, but it just made sense, and you know how successful everything was. It's just a historical fact. But it didn't feel good for me. I'm a very give and take kind of person, but compromising rubs me the wrong way. But, you know, I was shown by how successful Slide It In was on American radio. That's what set us up for radio. Was just ready and willing and waiting for the 87 album. And of course, MTV put the icing on that cake, the frosting. But I remember them doing the worst edit I think I've ever heard in my life on Still of the Night. And I said, that's absolutely not going anywhere, you know. And they sent it to radio anyway. And I thank radio for not playing it. Thank you, darlings. And we were the first act also to put a radio single on CD, which was Still of the Night. So most people were playing vinyl at that time, and this just crushed the poop out of stuff. It was amazing. The worst compromise that I went along with, and my band was heartbroken, was the slip of the tongue. We wanted Judgment Day. I designed a set like a 21st century blues band, which became Fool for Your Loving, which was just not kosher, you know, and I feel disappointed a lot of people, but primarily it disappointed us. And they were all, I mean, I had a president of Geffen, the A&R guy, the head radio guy, my manager, his right-hand guy in Record Plant's manager's office in Los Angeles, browbeating me that this was the best idea. This was the best idea. And all my wires were going, are you kidding? No way. No way. And then acquiesced. And when I called the band, they were just devastated, you know. But whatever, it's okay. It is what it is.
Now I know we're going to run out of time, so just a couple of quick updates. Then you did have an inguinal hernia, which listen, I've been operated twice.
Yeah,
I've been operated on both sides for those, so I know exactly what's that. Are you okay? What's your sort of?
No. That's it wasn't anything to do with this dreadful pandemic. This happened to me my first show in Australia in Melbourne. The second song was Slide It In, which is a big vocal projection. I use my whole body when I sing. And I just felt this very unusual and painful pop in the old nether regions. And it was a kind of, oh, Christ, you know, and the place is going nuts. And I'm on this long ego thrust into the crowd. And I've got 2 young women who work with me. So I couldn't drop my pants and go, give me an ice pack. You know, and my wife was out at the mix. So sadly, but fortunately for me, Klaus had to cancel of the Scorpions, was rushed to hospital after the show. He was passing a kidney stone. So our whole Australian tour was messed up, but it gave me a bunch of days of icing and being able to do the next show. I think had we been able to go in Japan, where I was starting with 2 consecutive shows, I most likely would have ended up in hospital, and I would still be in Japan right now, separated from my wife. So it's weird, but no, I live in a small community, and I'm very connected with the local authorities, the medical people, and I was actually going to see the Surgeon General, who was going to, perform surgery on it's a bilateral inguinal hernia, and within hours of making this appointment, the whole medical thing throughout America was closed down, and only life-threatening illnesses were allowed in hospitals. And mine, although career-threatening, but really, I'm not sure I would have wanted. I know a lot of the doctors and nurses in my local community, and man, they are the new superheroes. Well, they've always been, but to go through this, a lot of them wearing masks 2-3 times instead of once. It's just so heroic. I'm so proud of them. But do I want to go into a hospital while this is going on at my age? Not sure. But I have to have it done. So if we don't have a terrible second wave, which who knows how it's going to happen with this reopening, it'll be the first thing on my agenda to do. But yeah, it's very painful, isn't it?
Oh yes, and they talk about having something called strangulation, where it twists around whatever. And I had to go in emergency.
I can't. So if I can't sing loud, I can't do what I do normally. Otherwise, are you kidding? I'd be in the studio every day. It hurts. I can't strain. And it looks like I'm much better endowed in my underwear than I actually am. Looks like I've got a couple of fresh farm eggs in there.
I know. And I'll finish on this because I know we're going to run out of time. You had in a previous interview.
Yeah, you want to do? Maybe we can do a bit more next week, Mitch, before we do the Carol thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just stop it there. And as always, a great pleasure. And as we say in Montreal, merci beaucoup. Un gros grand plaisir. And thank you for all the music over the years. I devour Whitesnake like you can't believe. So.
Well, I'm so happy. I read on my Twitter today how much you were enjoying the rock album. And it's a labor of love for me, a lot of time and resource. And I'm thrilled because there's going to be a lot of everything on there is tweaked, even if you have the new slide it in. All or Nothing and Love Ain't No Stranger. We found some more guitars. Everything's furniture's all been rearranged.
Yep, and I love it. And
that's great.
Still of the Night, All or Nothing. They've always stood the test of time, but the Restless Heart stuff that had been sort of forgotten about, just to hear this coat of paint on it is just like, oh, thank the Lord, merci beaucoup. And on that, merci beaucoup.
Well, All or Nothing.
Yeah,
this is how Cozy and I, God rest his soul, Cozy and I came together. He came over to see me to ask if I'd write a song for Michael Schenker Group when Cozy was still in there. So, I started to mess around with this song. And then he was going, oh, yeah, that's cool. And the more and more we talked, I said, why don't you join me? I said, I'm going through another transition. And we had just a blast. He's a hell of a character, and I truly miss him. The whole 87 album, the Crying in the Rain stuff, was all rearranged and for Cozy, and he was just going through a strange time in his life. So we brought Ainsley in, who did a masterly job, but all of that was arranged for Cozy.
Yeah.
And with that, Mitch, I thank you with all my heart.
Yes.
And stay safe and well.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll speak again very shortly.
Absolutely. Talk to you next week. Merci, sir. Bonsoir.
This has been Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. For more exclusive content and interviews, subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and many more. Follow Mitch on all the socials, especially Twitter, @Mitch Lafon, and on Instagram, @Mitch_Lafon. Get your Mitch merch now at loudtracks.com/Mitch.